Princess Valshara Kethmaran had worn the crown since she was a small child. It was made of crystallized starlight, cold and heavy against her head. The crown meant she would one day rule 12 billion people across 47 worlds. She had been trained her whole life for this. She learned to hide her feelings. She learned that emotions made rulers weak. She learned to calculate every action and every word dot, so when the broken human ship came limping into ethering space, she expected nothing special. The ship was called the Persistence. It was trailing smoke and fire. It was broadcasting a call for help in 100 different languages. Valshara thought it was just another weak species that had reached too far into the darkness of space that she did not expect. Captain Marcus Cole, the human, stood before the High Council in the Great Throne Room. He was covered in black soot and dried blood. Most of the blood was not his own. His ship had been attacked by the Vorex, a cruel species that hunted weaker races for sport. His crew of 42 had been cut down to only 11 survivors. His clothes were torn. His face was tired. But his eyes were not broken. The Emperor, Valshara's father, sat on his throne made of living crystal. He looked down at the small human with mild interest. Around him, the council members whispered to each other. They had seen many species come begging for help. They had seen them all bend the knee. "Human," the Emperor said, his voice filling the massive chamber, "we offer you sanctuary, safety for you and your remaining crew. In exchange, you will share information about your species, your military strength, your weaknesses, your homeworld's location." It was a generous offer. Most species would have fallen to their knees in gratitude. The Etherians were the most powerful civilization in this part of the galaxy. Their protection meant survival. Captain Cole stood silent for a moment. He looked around the room at all the tall, elegant aliens with their silver skin and glowing eyes. He looked at the armed guards with their energy weapons. He looked at the Emperor on his high throne. Then he shook his head. "With respect, Your Majesty," Cole said. His voice was rough and tired, but it did not shake. "I cannot accept those terms. I will not trade my people's secrets for safety. We will take our chances out there." A gasp moved through the council chamber like a wave. Valshara felt her own breath catch in her chest. No one refused Ethering hospitality. It was considered the highest honor in the known galaxy. Species fought wars just to receive an invitation to this world. And this small, battered creature was saying no. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. For the first time in many years, Valshara saw genuine curiosity on her father's face. "You would choose death over sharing information? You would die for such a small principle?" Cole's answer was simple and direct. "I would die for a lot less than that, Your Majesty. But I would rather live for my crew. And I cannot live with myself if I betray Earth to save my own skin." The throne room fell completely silent. Valshara watched the human captain standing alone in the center of that vast space. He was so small compared to the Etherians. His body was soft and fragile. He would live maybe 80 or 90 years, while her people lived for thousands. By every measure, he was nothing, but he stood there like he was the tallest person in the room. That night, Valshara could not sleep. She went to the royal archives and called up every piece of information the Dominion had ever collected about humans. There was not much. They were a young species from a small blue planet called Earth. They had only been traveling between stars for a few hundred years. Their bodies were weak. They could be killed by temperature changes, by lack of water, by diseases too small to see. They were unremarkable in every way the Etherians measured worth, and yet Valshara could not stop thinking about the captain's eyes. They had held no fear. They had held no submission. There was only a quiet strength that she had never seen before. It was like a fire that burned steady and would not go out. she watched the recording of his speech again and again. She studied the way he stood, the way he spoke, the way he looked at her father without flinching. Her people had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of species. They had built an empire that stretched across the darkness of space. But none of them had ever looked at her father like that. Like they were equals. The next morning, Valshara went to her father's private chamber. The emperor was surprised to see her. She rarely came to him unless summoned. "Father," she said, "what will you do with the humans?" The emperor smiled. It was a cold smile, the smile of someone who was always playing a game. "I am curious about them. They are weak, but they have something unusual. I have decided to grant them sanctuary without conditions." Valshara blinked. "Without conditions? Why?" "Because I want to see what they will do." Her father turned to look out at the stars through his great window. "Any creature will fight when cornered. Any creature will resist when threatened. But what does a creature do when given freedom? When given kindness they did not earn. That is when you see their true nature." Valshara understood. It was a test. Her father was always testing, always measuring, always calculating. Just like she had been taught to do. "And what do you think their true nature is?" she asked. The emperor was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know," he admitted. "And that is what makes them interesting. For the first time in centuries, I do not know what will happen next." Valshara returned to her chambers and stood before her mirror. She looked at the crown on her head, the symbol of everything she was supposed to be. She thought about the human captain, covered in blood and soot, refusing an emperor's offer because of something called principle. She had been taught that such behavior was foolish, wasteful, illogical. So why did it make her heart beat faster? She told herself it was just curiosity. She told herself she was simply studying a new species, learning their ways so she could better understand their weaknesses. That was her duty as future empress. To know all things, to calculate all outcomes. But deep inside, in a place she had been taught to ignore, Valshara felt something she had never felt before. It was small and strange, and a little bit frightening. It was hope. She did not know what she was hoping for. She did not know why this tiny, fragile species made her feel like something was about to change. But as she looked at her own reflection, at the cold crown on her head, she wondered for the first time in her life if there might be another way to live. The humans would stay on her world. And she would watch them. She would watch them very carefully indeed. The humans were given a small building near the spaceport. It was not fancy, but it was clean and safe. They were free to move around the city as they pleased. They were given food and medical supplies. And then the Etherians waited to see what they would do. What they did was impossible. On the second day, Captain Cole's engineer, a small woman named Yuki Tanaka, wandered into the lower districts of the city. These were the poor areas where workers and refugees lived. The buildings were old. The streets were dirty. The Etherian government had forgotten these places long ago. There was a water purification machine that had been broken for 3 years. The people in the lower districts had been drinking bad water and getting sick. They had asked the government for help many times, but the bureaucrats always said it was low priority. There were more important things to fix. The poor could wait. Tanaka fixed the machine in one afternoon. She asked for nothing in return. When the local people tried to pay her, she just smiled and shook her head. "Water is life," she said. "Everyone deserves clean water." Valshara heard about this and could not believe it. She sent her servants to check if it was true. It was. On the third day, the human medic set up a small clinic near the docks. He treated injured workers, including aliens from species that the Etherians considered beneath notice. He worked for hours without rest. He taught the local healers simple techniques that did not require any advanced machines. Just clean hands, careful pressure, and patience. One of Velshara's advisors suggested the humans were trying to build political power. They were trying to make allies among the lower classes. It was a clever strategy, but Velshara watched the recordings carefully. She studied the medic's face as he treated a child with a broken arm. There was no calculation in his eyes. There was only focus and care. He treated that alien child like she was the most important person in the universe. It made no sense. On the fourth day, Velshara decided to follow Captain Cole herself. She wore simple clothes and covered her face. No one recognized her as the princess. She watched from the shadows as Cole walked into the refugee quarter. The refugee quarter was home to thousands of aliens who had lost their worlds. Some had fled from the Virax. Some had escaped natural disasters. Some had simply been forgotten by the galaxy. They lived in tiny rooms stacked on top of each other. They had nothing. Cole sat with them. He listened to their stories. He could not understand most of their languages. He did not speak Morthian or Kelix or any of the dozen other tongues that filled that sad place. But he sat and he listened and he nodded. He held their hands. He looked into their eyes, and somehow that was enough. Velshara watched an old Kelix woman weep with gratitude simply because someone had listened to her. No one had listened to her in years. That evening, Cole gave his own food ration to a small Morthian child. She was an orphan. Her parents had been killed by the same Virax raiders who had attacked his ship. There was no connection between them. The child's people had nothing to offer humanity. There was no strategic value in feeding her, but Cole knelt down and handed her the food, packed with a gentle smile. Velshara stepped out of the shadows. "Why did you do that?" Cole looked up at her. If he was surprised to see the princess in the refugee quarter, he did not show it. "Do what?" "Give away your food. That child is nothing to you. Her people have nothing to offer Earth. There is no logic in your action." Cole stood up slowly. He was much shorter than Velshara, but again she had that strange feeling that he was looking at her as an equal. "That is not why you help someone, princess. Then why?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking about her question. He did not rush to answer. He did not try to flatter her or say what she wanted to hear. He just thought carefully about the truth. "Because she was hungry," he said finally. "And I was not." Velshara felt like someone had struck her across the face. The words were so simple, so small, and yet they shattered something inside her that she had not even known existed. Her whole life, she had been taught to calculate. Every action had to serve a purpose. Every gift had to create a debt. Every kindness was an investment that expected a return. That was how empires were built. That was how power was maintained. But the humans did not seem to understand this. They operated on completely different rules. Their mathematics did not balance. Their equations made no sense. They gave without expecting to receive. They helped without hoping for reward. It was inefficient. It was illogical. It was illogical. It was foolish. It was the most beautiful thing Velshara had ever seen. She stayed in the refugee quarter until late that night, watching the humans move among the forgotten people of the galaxy. She watched them share food and medicine and time. She watched them treat every single person, no matter how small or strange or poor, like they mattered. When she finally returned to the palace, Velshara stood before her mirror again. The crown sat cold and heavy on her head. She had never questioned it before. It was simply who she was, what she was. But now she wondered, was this really the only way to lead? The humans had no power. They had no army. They had no wealth. They were guests in a strange land, survivors of a terrible attack, alone in a galaxy that could crush them at any moment. And yet they were richer than any Etherine she had ever met. They had something that all the crystal palaces and starship fleets could not buy. They had compassion without conditions. They had love without limits. Valshara reached up and touched the cold crown on her head. For the first time in her life, she felt its weight. Really felt it. And she wondered what it would feel like to set it down just for a moment, just to see what she might become without it. The Varex came back. 300 warships appeared at the edge of Etherian space. They came out of fold space like a swarm of angry insects, their weapons already glowing with power. The lead ship broadcast a message to the entire system. "You have something that belongs to us," the Varex commander said. His face filled the screens across the planet, a twisted thing covered in scars and metal implants. "The human prey escaped us. We want them back. Give them to us, and we will leave. Refuse, and we will take them by force. You have one cycle to decide." The transmission ended. And then the panic began. The High Council gathered in emergency session. Valshara sat in her place beside her father's throne, listening to the advisors argue and shout. The Varex were not just raiders. They were servants of the hegemony, the other great power in the galaxy. If the Etherians fought the Varex, they might start a war with the hegemony itself. Millions could die. Worlds could burn. All for 11 humans. "The mathematics is simple," said Lord Kethan, the oldest member of the council. "We cannot risk our entire civilization for a handful of aliens. We must give them to the Varex." "They came to us for sanctuary," another advisor argued. "If we betray them, other species will never trust us again." "Trust is worth nothing if we are dead," Lord Kethan replied. "The humans are insignificant. Their entire species is insignificant. We must think of our own people first." Valshara listened to them talk about the humans like they were objects to be traded. She thought about Captain Cole giving his food to a hungry child. She thought about Yuki Tanaka fixing the water machine. She thought about the medic treating the sick, and broken with nothing but his hands and his heart. These were not insignificant people. These were the most remarkable beings she had ever encountered. Her father, the Emperor, raised his hand. The room fell silent. "I have made my decision," he said. His voice was calm and cold, as always. "We will contact the Varex and arrange for the transfer of the human prisoners. We cannot afford a war." The council members nodded in relief. It was the logical choice. The safe choice. The right choice, according to all their calculations. But Valshara felt something break inside her chest. No, the word escaped her lips before she could stop it. It was small at first, almost a whisper. But it echoed through the silent chamber like thunder. Every eye in the room turned to her. The council members stared in shock. Her father's face went very still and very cold. "You object, daughter?" The Emperor's voice was ice. Valshara's heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. She had never spoken against her father in public. She had never spoken against anyone in public. It was not her place. It was not her role. She was supposed to watch and learn and wait until it was her turn to rule. But she could not stay silent. "Not now. Not about this. They came to us for help." Her voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. "They trusted us. Captain Cole could have given us information about Earth. He could have bought his freedom with secrets. But he refused because he would not betray his people." She stood up from her chair. Her legs felt weak, but she made herself stand tall. "If we hand them over to the Varex, we prove that Etherian honor is a lie. We prove that our word means nothing. We prove that the hegemony is right about us. They have always called us cowards who hide behind calculations and clever tricks. If we do this, we prove them right." The Emperor's eyes were hard as diamonds. "And if we fight, we risk everything we have built. 10,000 years of civilization, Billions of lives. Velshara reached up and removed her crown. The cold weight left her head, and she felt strangely light. She placed the crown on the council table with a soft click. "Then we risk everything," she said. "But I would rather lose an empire with honor than keep one through betrayal." The room was completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Captain Cole had been brought to the council chamber to witness the decision. He stood near the door, surrounded by guards, watching with quiet eyes. When Velshara looked at him, she saw something in his face that she did not understand. It might have been surprise. It might have been respect. It might have been something else entirely. The Emperor stared at his daughter for a long moment. His face was unreadable. Then, slowly, he began to smile. It was not a cold smile this time. It was something warmer. Something almost like pride. "You have your mother's fire," he said quietly. "I had forgotten what that looked like." He turned to the council. "My daughter speaks truth. If we surrender the humans, we surrender our honor. And an empire without honor is already dead." He stood from his throne. "Prepare the fleet. We fight." Later that night, Cole found Velshara on the observation deck. She was staring at the distant Virex fleet. 300 points of light against the darkness of space. "That was either very brave or very stupid," Cole said. "Among my people, there is no difference." He laughed. It was a warm sound that made something flutter in her chest. "Among mine either." He came to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Humans burn so hot. They live so fast and so bright. You did not have to do that," he said. "You risked everything. Your crown, your future, your whole civilization. For us." Velshara turned to look at him. Without her crown, she felt like a different person. Lighter, freer, more herself than she had ever been. "Yes," she said quietly. "I did." Cole studied her face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. He nodded slowly. "Thank you, Princess." "You can call me Velshara," she said. "I am not sure I am a princess anymore." "You're wrong about that," Cole replied. "You became a real princess today. Maybe for the first time." She did not understand what he meant, but she liked the way his words made her feel. The battle began at dawn. The Ethering fleet moved out to meet the Variks. 500 warships against 300. On paper, the numbers favored the Etherians. But war was never about numbers alone. The Variks were brutal fighters who knew no fear. They had been killing and conquering for thousands of years. And behind them stood the shadow of the hegemony, watching to see if the Etherians were truly willing to fight. Velshara watched the battle from the command center, surrounded by admirals and tacticians who shouted orders into their communication devices. The holographic displays showed the two fleets crashing together like waves of fire. Ships exploded into brilliant flowers of light. Thousands were dying with every passing minute. The Etherians were holding their ground, but they were not winning. The Variks were too fierce, too experienced. Slowly, steadily, the Ethering line was being pushed back. And then something unexpected happened. A small, battered ship came burning out of the Ethering formation. It was barely holding together. Its hull was patched with salvaged metal and desperate repairs. Smoke trailed from its engines like blood from a wound. It was the Persistence. Captain. Cole's ship dove straight into the heart of the Virex fleet, and his voice filled every channel, every frequency, every speaker in the battle zone. "This is Captain Marcus Cole of the Earth vessel Persistence. You attacked my ship. You killed my people. And now you threaten the ones who showed us kindness when we had nothing." His voice was calm and steady, like he was discussing the weather. "I want you to understand something about humans. We do not forget. We do not forgive. And we do not give up. The Persistence was not trying to win. It could not win. 11 humans on a broken ship against 300 warships was not a battle. It was suicide. But that was not the point. The point was to create chaos, to draw attention, to show the Virex and the watching hegemony, and the entire galaxy what humans did when they were cornered. They attacked. The Persistence weaved through the Virex formation like a dancer, firing its small weapons at every target it could reach. It was faster than it should have been, more agile than it should have been. Cole flew that dying ship like it was part of his own body. The Virex were confused. They were not used to prey that fought back. They were not used to enemies who attacked when they should be running. Ships broke formation to chase the Persistence, and that created openings for the Etherin fleet to exploit, but it could not last. The Persistence was taking damage with every passing second. Valshara watched the ship's hull begin to crack and buckle. She watched fires spreading through its compartments. She watched it dying, slowly, painfully, and she could not breathe. "He is going to die," she whispered. "They are all going to die." The admirals around her nodded gravely. "They are buying us time," one of them said. "A noble sacrifice. We should make good use of it." Something inside Valshara snapped. She ran from the command center before anyone could stop her. She sprinted through the corridors of the palace, her feet pounding against the crystal floors. She reached the royal hangar and found a fast cruiser waiting for deployment. "Princess, you cannot take this ship," the guard said. "It is too dangerous." "I am not asking permission," Valshara said, and pushed past him into the cockpit. She had learned to fly when she was young. It was considered a royal accomplishment, like music or poetry. She had never flown in combat. She had never flown toward danger instead of away from it, but she thought of Cole giving his food to a hungry child. She thought of him listening to refugees who had nothing to offer. She thought of him saying, "She was hungry, and I was not, like it," was the simplest truth in the universe. She pushed the engines to maximum and burned toward the battle. The cruiser cut through the Virex formation like a blade. Valshara was not a skilled combat pilot, but she was desperate, and sometimes desperation was enough. She dodged and weaved and prayed to gods she did not really believe in. The Persistence appeared on her screen, surrounded by Virex hunters. Its shields were failing. Its hull was coming apart. "Captain Cole," she called over the communication channel. "Fall back to my position. My shields can cover you." His voice came back, filled with static and pain. "What are you doing? Get out of here. This is our fight." "You taught me that some things matter more than calculations," she shot back. "Do not make me learn that lesson alone." There was a long pause. Then Cole laughed, a rough sound broken by coughing. "Etherin cruiser, this is Persistence. Falling back to your position." Another pause. "And Valshara?" "Thank you." She brought her ship alongside the Persistence and extended her shields around the damaged vessel. Together, they turned and began fighting their way back toward the Etherin lines. It should not have been possible. 2 ships against a fleet. A dying human vessel and a princess who had never seen real combat. The mathematics said they would fail, but the Etherin fleet saw their princess flying into danger to save the humans. They saw the Persistence, broken and burning, still fighting. And something changed in their hearts. They pushed forward with a ferocity they had never shown before. They stopped fighting like soldiers following orders. They started fighting like people protecting something that mattered. The Virex had never faced anything like it. They were used to enemies who calculated, who measured, who retreated when the numbers turned against them. They did not know what to do with enemies who attacked harder when they were losing. The Virex line broke. First one ship turned and ran. Then another. Then a dozen. Then 100. The terrible fleet that had seemed so unstoppable began to scatter like leaves in a storm. The hegemony, watching from far away, saw their puppet army crumble against an enemy that should have surrendered. They saw what happened when cold calculation met burning will, and they were afraid. Velshara guided the Persistence back to the safety of the Etherian lines. The battle was won, but as she looked at the broken ship limping beside her, she felt no joy, only fear. "Cole," she called. "Marcus, answer me." There was no reply. She docked her cruiser next to the Persistence and ran through the damaged corridors until she found the bridge. It was filled with smoke and sparking wires. Most of the crew were unconscious or injured. Cole was slumped over the control panel, blood running down his face from a wound on his head. But he was breathing. "Medical team!" Velshara screamed into her communicator. "I need a medical team now." She knelt beside him and took his hand. It was warm. Humans were always so warm. "Stay with me," she whispered. "You do not get to die. Not after everything. Not after you taught me how to live." She did not know if he could hear her. She did not know if anyone could hear her, but she held his hand and did not let go. The days after the battle were strange and quiet. The hegemony pulled back from Etherian space. They sent diplomats instead of warships. They spoke of peace and trade and friendship. The galaxy had seen what happened when the Etherians truly decided to fight, and no one wanted to test them again. But Velshara noticed none of this. She spent her days and nights in the medical bay, sitting beside the bed where Captain Marcus Cole lay unconscious. The doctors said his injuries were serious, but not fatal. Humans were surprisingly tough, they told her. Their bodies could survive damage that would kill an Etherian. They healed quickly. They fought to live with a stubbornness that the doctors had never seen before. Still, Cole did not wake up. 3 days passed. Velshara barely ate. She barely slept. Her father came to visit once, looked at her sitting there with her crown still missing, and said nothing. He just nodded and left. On the 4th day, Cole opened his eyes. "You look terrible," he said. His voice was weak and rough, but it was the most beautiful sound Velshara had ever heard. She laughed. It was a strange sound, wet with tears she had not known she was crying. "You are one to talk." Cole tried to smile, then winced in pain. "Did we win?" "Yes." She took his hand without thinking about it. His skin was warm against hers. "We won. The Varex are gone. The hegemony is negotiating for peace." "You did it." "We did it," he corrected. "I heard you on the radio, you know, before I passed out. You came for us. You taught me that some things matter more than calculation." He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were tired but bright. "Your crown is missing." Velshara reached up and touched her bare head. "I left it on the council table. I have not gone back for it. Your father must be angry. My father offered me a new one this morning, larger and more beautiful than the old one. He said it was a reward for saving the Dominion." Cole studied her face. "But you did not take it." "No." She shook her head slowly. "I told him I was not sure I wanted it anymore." The room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of medical machines. Cole's hand was still warm in hers. She had not let go, and he had not pulled away. "What do you want, Velshara?" he asked. "If not the crown, then what?" The question hung in the air. It was the most important question anyone had ever asked her. All her life, she had been told what to want. Power. Legacy. The continuation of her bloodline across thousands of years. The cold weight of responsibility and duty. But now, sitting beside this strange human who had shown her a different way to live, she found that none of those things seemed to matter. "I want to learn," she said finally. "I want to understand how your people see the universe. Why you help without expecting anything in return. Why you fight for strangers. Why you love so fiercely in your short lives. She met his eyes. I want to know what it feels like to be free. Cole's hand tightened around hers. That is going to take a while. I have time. For the first time in her life, Velshara smiled without holding anything back. It felt strange on her face, like a muscle she had never used before. My people live for thousands of years. I think I can spare a few of them to learn from yours. Cole smiled back. Then I guess I have a lot of teaching to do. 2 weeks later, Velshara stood before the High Council one last time. Her father sat on his throne, watching her with those unreadable eyes. The council members were silent and waiting. I have an announcement, Velshara said. Her voice was strong and clear. I am stepping aside from the line of succession. I will not be your future empress. Gasps filled the chamber. Lord Keth then rose to his feet in protest. This is madness. You cannot abandon your duty. I am not abandoning anything, Velshara replied calmly. I am choosing something different. I will serve the Dominion as our first ambassador to Earth. I will build a bridge between our peoples. I will learn from the humans and bring their wisdom back to our world. She looked at her father. You taught me to calculate, father, to measure every action and every consequence. And my calculations tell me that the greatest thing I can do for our civilization is not to rule it, but to change it. The emperor was quiet for a long moment. Then he rose from his throne and walked down the steps to stand before his daughter. He was tall and cold and terrifying, just as he had always been. But when he spoke, his voice was soft. Your mother would be proud of you, he said. As am I? He reached into his robe and pulled out something small and silver. It was not a crown. It was a simple pin, shaped like a star. This was hers, he said. She wore it on the day we met. She told me that stars were more important than crowns because stars gave light to everyone, while crowns only mattered to the person wearing them. He pressed the pin into Velshara's hand. Go, my daughter. Learn from the humans. Become a star. Velshara closed her fingers around the pin. It was warm from her father's touch. I will, she promised. 1 month later, she stood on the bridge of a new ship, watching the blue-green sphere of Earth grow larger in the view screen. Marcus Cole stood beside her, healed and strong again. Are you nervous? He asked. Terrified, she admitted. I have never been so far from home. I have never been so unsure of what comes next. Cole took her hand. That is what being free feels like. Velshara looked at him, at this small human who had changed everything just by being kind. She thought about all the things she had left behind. The crown, the throne, the weight of 10,000 years of tradition. She did not miss any of it. It feels wonderful, she said, and together they flew toward the future. Years later, historians would write about this moment. They would call it the beginning of a new age, the day when two civilizations began to learn from each other. They would talk about the treaties, and the trade agreements and the great alliance that followed. But those who were there knew the truth was simpler. It was not about politics or power, or the fate of empires. It was about a princess who learned that the greatest strength was not in the crown you wore, but in the moment you chose to set it down. It was about a human who taught her that kindness was not weakness, that compassion was not foolishness, and that the shortest lives could burn the brightest. It was about two people who found each other across the darkness of space and decided that some things were worth more than calculation. Some things were worth everything. And that was how even an alien princess let go of her crown when the human arrived.